If you are listening to this story, tell me where you are in the world. I want to know how far a warm Christmas gathering can turn into the stage of a reversal no one ever saw coming. That Christmas, my parents' house in Selwood Moorland glowed like a postcard. The tree stretched nearly to the ceiling, draped in golden lights and shimmering red glass ornaments, set right beside the large window that looked out onto the garden, veiled in frost. The kitchen smelled of roasted turkey and gingerbread. In the dining room, the table was dressed in a spotless white cloth. At the center, a wreath of green, threaded with red ribbons, candles flickering and casting shadows across crystal glasses. I sat to my father's right, from where I could see the entire table, including Melissa, leaning toward my mother with some whispered remark. She wore a deep velvet dress of midnight blue, and at her neck, the pearl necklace I had given her in our third year of marriage. Every gesture of hers was calculated. The sidelong glance to gauge my reaction, the half-smile of someone ready to play her final card. Just as the main course was served, as knives and forks began to touch plates, Melissa rose. She cleared her throat lightly, raised her glass as if about to offer a toast. Before dessert, she said, her voice soft but steady enough to silence the room, I have a special gift for Peter. I lifted my gaze and looked straight into her eyes. From my seat, I noticed Nate, my cousin, leaning back slightly, curious. Melissa reached into her handbag and drew out a plain white envelope. No ribbon, no card, nothing to disguise it. She slid it across the table to me with the ease of presenting a bill to a customer. "Merry Christmas," she said, her eyes gleaming with the light that only comes when someone is certain they have already won. I stared at the envelope for a few seconds, long enough to feel the air in the room grow thick. Then I pulled my chair closer, opened it carefully. Inside was a divorce decree, every line filled, her signature at the bottom, the red seal of the court stamped bold. She had even highlighted the division of assets with a golden marker, as if presenting a design proposal to a client. I folded the paper, laid it down, and lifted my head. "Thank you," I said, my voice so low only those nearest could hear. No question of why, no sign of hesitation. I simply uncapped my pen, signed my name in one smooth stroke, added the date, folded it neatly, and slid it back across the table. Melissa raised her brows, faltered for a beat, but held her smile. I had been ready for this moment a long time. I was not there to argue or to plead. I was there to close a plan she never knew was unfolding. I bent down, lifted from beside my chair a box that fit neatly in the hand, wrapped in plain brown paper, tied with a simple leather string. No bow, no label. I set it before her beside the porcelain plate edged in gold and the half-filled glass of wine. "A gift for you," I said. She hesitated, suspicion flickering in her eyes. But under the warm lights, Melissa still smiled, as if convinced nothing inside could threaten her. Her fingers slipped along the cord, pulled it free, tore the paper. The sound of crumpling filled the stillness of the room. Inside lay a leather-bound file, edges worn but carefully kept. She opened the cover, lifted the top sheet, and in that instant, I saw the color drain from her face. Lips pressed tight, lashes fluttering, breath caught midair. No one had to read aloud. I knew she recognized it. Right before her was a notarized agreement, with dates and her signature. A slanting hand, ink feathered at the corner, identical to that night she had laughed loudly after too much wine. Each page with appendices, every clause examined, reinforced and locked tight with legal language she never imagined would return to strike her. I said nothing. Melissa asked nothing. Between us was a silence sharper than any argument. I rested my hand on the table, feeling the chill of the glass beneath my fingers. This was not a sudden decision, I thought. Though my eyes must have spoken it, I was prepared. And then the image of the dining room blurred, the sound of silverware receded, making way for the memory that rushed back. The night Melissa signed the corner of one of my sketches, without realizing she had just laid the foundation for her collapse. I cannot point to the exact moment when everything began to sour. Melissa was not the kind of person who slammed doors or shouted in the street. She was more subtle than that. The erosion began with small jokes, drifting in the air of dinner parties, harmless to anyone listening from the outside, but leaving scratches inside me that never healed. At first, I believed I had married a clever, witty woman who knew how to make a crowd laugh. At every reception, Melissa was the center, every eye drawn to her laughter spilling out like red wine across a white tablecloth. But soon I realized that most of the stories that made people laugh so hard had me as the main character, and the joke was usually on me. One autumn evening, at the opening of my furniture showroom, I wore a light gray suit, neat and fitting for the warm tone space. When a guest remarked that I looked stylish, Melissa cut in immediately. That is because I chose it. If he dressed himself, he would still be wearing the plaid shirts from college. Laughter rippled around the room and I smiled along. But inside, I wondered what mistake I had made to feel ashamed of the clothes on my own back. The comments did not stop at clothing. When I spoke about a new project at the workshop, Melissa would tilt her head, smirk, and say, without me reminding him, he would have forgotten his meeting with the client today. Without me, how could he even survive? Everyone would laugh again, as if she had made a harmless quip. I, on the other hand, felt my chest sink as if the walls around me were closing in. Melissa managed my schedule without ever giving a command. She only needed to speak loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. Did you finish the drawings for the Parker house yet? Do not make them call me to check. Or, do not forget to cancel tomorrow night. We have the Blake's party. What sounded like concern was a way of showing everyone that I needed her to run my life. I began to avoid social gatherings. At first, the excuse was work. Later, it was exhaustion from wondering how she would turn me into the butt of her next joke. The workshop became my refuge. There I worked with wood, with colors and light, things that never mocked me. But even the workshop was not safe. Melissa would drop by unexpectedly just to see what I was doing, then leave with a remark like, if you get a new client, let me know so I can handle the contract. You only know how to draw. There were no shouts, no raised hands, only sweetened blades sliding in day after day. Each remark was a tightening rope, and I grew used to living in the shrinking space of my own life. Last summer, we were invited to a garden party at one of Melissa's friends. The afternoon was warm, golden light spilling over the long table spread with food. I sat at the edge, talking with a few acquaintances from the trade. Melissa had had a few glasses of white wine, her face flushed, her voice louder than usual. She drifted from group to group, chatting, until she suddenly appeared behind me, slipped her arms over my shoulder, and pulled a blue pen from her bag. On the table between us lay a sketch of a renovation project I had been idly drafting, a habit of mine whenever my hands were free. Melissa glanced at the sketch, laughed, and said loudly, "Sign it now. Sign that if we break up, this whole design belongs to you." She drew out the word breakup as if it were a punchline. People around us roared with laughter. I smiled too, but the smile never reached my eyes. "All right then," I said, handing her the pen. Melissa winked, scrawled her name at the corner of the sketch, the slanted line trailing off as her hand wavered from the wine. She dropped the pen, turned away, and carried on her conversation with friends by the pool as if nothing important had just happened. I stared at the signature for a long moment. To the others, it was a careless joke between husband and wife. To me, something different stirred. I folded the sheet carefully, slipped it into my portfolio, and went on with the evening as though nothing had changed. When the garden lights flickered on, laughter rising with the late summer cicadas, I still felt the edge of the sketch pressing against my bag like a piece of metal in my pocket. I did not yet know what I would do with it. I only knew that for the first time in years, I was holding something that was mine alone, and no one else recognized it. The morning after the garden party, Portland sunlight streamed through the living room curtains, golden and warm but revealing the sting of a restless night. Melissa was still asleep in bed, her tangled hair buried in the pillow, her breathing steady. I sat at the dining table, coffee steaming beside the briefcase I had set there the night before. Inside, the sketch with her slanted signature rested quietly like a puzzle piece that had just locked into a picture I was not yet ready to face. I finished the coffee, slipped the sketch into a clear plastic folder, and slid it into my backpack. Without an appointment, I drove straight to the notary's office on Hawthorne. The clerk, silver hair pulled back, half-moon glasses perched on her nose, read carefully and asked, "This signature was voluntary." I nodded, no further explanation. The red seal pressed into the corner with a dry thud, and I felt something small yet undeniable shift hands. Not the sketch itself, but a measure of power in the marriage. Leaving the office, I drove to the workshop. Mason was already there, cutting walnut boards for a new order. He looked up, pulled off his goggles, and studied me. "You look like you just won a bet." I dropped the folder onto the table and sat down. "Not a bet," I said. "Preparation." Mason had been my friend since apprenticeship days, the kind of man who understood silence. When I told him about the signature, he only nodded once, then pulled out his phone. "You need a safe place to keep the scans. I will create a new email account, one that no one knows about, just for us." We sat at the workbench while Mason set up two-factor authentication, creating a cloud folder with the cryptic name PL Safeguard. I photographed each page and uploaded it instantly. That night, while Melissa busied herself on the phone with friends from the party, I opened a plain spiral notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date, the time, and one word: begin. I did not write feelings, only facts. Each humiliating remark I recorded verbatim. Each time she rearranged my schedule without asking, I marked it with a cross. I wanted to turn what had once been fog into something countable, measurable. A week later, when Melissa traveled for 3 days to Seattle, I checked the drawer of the desk in our living room, where she often forgot unopened mail. Among the stack was a credit card envelope. I opened it, scanned the charges, and stopped. September 14th, our wedding anniversary, listed a transaction at the Riverlight Hotel downtown. The bill showed room fee, bar service, and a fruit platter. I set the statement on the table and drew a breath. That day, Melissa told me she had an important client meeting and would be home late. I had eaten pho alone at a small restaurant, thinking it was only a modest anniversary. Now the numbers on the page told me a different story. I did not call her, did not confront her. Instead, I photographed the page, uploaded it to PL Safeguard, then filed the original into a stiff paper binder hidden at the shop. In the weeks that followed, I began noticing the smaller fragments I once ignored. A spa bill of several $100s on the same day she claimed to be at a conference in Eugene. A car service charge near midnight during the week she said she was working late at the office. Each time I noted the date and time in my spiral, added a line of description, then stored an image of the receipt in the cloud. The hardest part was not finding these traces, but keeping my face unchanged when Melissa walked into the room. I still asked about her day, still listened to her stories, still let her adjust my collar before I step out. I learned to let my eyes pass over her excuses without pausing. One evening at dinner, her phone lit up with a message. Arrived. 20 minutes. She quickly flipped the screen down and said she was going to meet an old friend who needed advice. I nodded, ladled more soup into my bowl, and asked nothing. After she left, I wrote in the notebook, out at 8:17 p.m., message said arrived. Weather, light rain, not much, but enough. I began to feel like an architect drafting a new design, not for a house, but for my escape. Each receipt a brick, each timestamp a beam, each notebook page a hidden foundation underground, unseen but steady. It changed the way I moved through the house. Instead of answering her jabs, I smiled and let them slip by. No more arguing, no more explanations. She thought I had surrendered. In truth, I had stepped back to see the fractures in the whole structure. Sometimes, while she slept, I opened my laptop, logged into the hidden account, and checked the files. PL Safeguard grew heavier by the week. Photos of receipts, bank statements, and recordings of stray phone calls when she assumed I was not listening. I named each file by date, aligning them into a clean line of time. Within months, I had built a small archive that told the story without needing commentary. Each piece was a shard, and together they revealed not a marriage broken by irreconcilable differences, but a deliberate, patient plan that edged me aside. Yet I did not confront her, not from fear, but because I knew any premature move would break the structure I was building. I needed time for the design to be completed, for each joint to lock with no gap. Mason sometimes asked, "What will you do when it is enough?" I only shrugged, "Not yet." He nodded, understanding that the answer lay not in the plan, but in the moment. In the long nights at the workshop, I listened to rain against the tin roof, smelled the cut wood mixed with oil on my hands. Each shaving of timber, each clean edge was a reminder. These hands still obey me, and when the time comes, they will shape the story too. The signature on that sketch was only the beginning. The receipts, the statements, the notes, all forming the frame. And I knew when the day arrived, I would not need to shout for belief. I would only need to open the file and let the facts speak for themselves. I walked into Alicia Chen's office on a damp Monday morning, the scent of roasted coffee drifting from a machine in the corner of the reception. Alicia was a well-known family lawyer in Portland, respected for her precision and her ability to find loopholes in any legal document. Her office was not crowded with bookshelves or decorated with framed accolades. It was a clear space of a walnut desk, white walls, and a white orchid by the window. I placed my file bag on the desk, unzipped it, and pulled out the sketch notarized months before. The red seal still sharp in the corner, Melissa's slanted signature glaring like a dare. Alicia picked it up, slid on her glasses, read through once, then set it down. "What do you intend to make of this?" she asked, her voice even, but her eyes sharp as a blade. "I want it turned into a binding agreement," I said. "Not a joke, not a scrap of paper forgotten in a drawer. I want it to stand in court." Alicia nodded slowly, drew a leather notebook toward her, and began writing. "Then we will need to do several things. First, confirm the voluntariness of the signature. Second, establish the time and setting. Third, add appendices to specify the division of property and secure your rights in the workshop. Fourth, include a non-defamation clause so that if she changes her story, you can strike back." I listened silently, as if watching an architect raise the frame of a structure. Alicia continued, "We will add a clause protecting the workshop. Any intellectual property, designs, or contracts tied to your work will remain your sole assets. For joint finances, I will draft a division of accounts and assign shares based on contribution and current value. I will also include a temporary residence clause. That way, if conflict arises, you retain the right to stay in the home until everything is legally resolved." I looked at her. Temporary residence? What if she tries to force me out? Alicia's mouth curved slightly. She would need a court order. With this agreement and the evidence you have, that is almost impossible. What matters is that you stay calm and avoid any action that could be twisted into a threat. We spent nearly 2 hours reviewing each clause. Alicia read each line aloud, explained its legal weight, then noted adjustments. For voluntariness, she asked me to describe in detail the night Melissa signed the sketch. The place, those who were present, and her state of mind. Do not say she was drunk, only that she was not coerced, not pressured, that she signed freely in front of witnesses. If necessary, I can call someone from that night as a witness. When the framework was complete, Alicia photographed each page with her phone, stored them in her encrypted drive. She handed me a new printed draft with full clauses and appendices. "This is the updated version. You keep the notarized original as foundation. This version we use for court if Melissa files first. We submit this with your evidence as proof that she had already acknowledged the terms." I held the stack, heavier than the paper itself. It was not the weight of sheets, but of a structure I had lacked for years. Before I left, Alicia handed me a small envelope. "This USB contains the original scans, full metadata, creation time, scanner, and IPRS. I keep one copy here, one in a bank vault. You keep this and open it only when needed." That night, while Melissa dined with an old colleague, I sat in the workshop under the lamp and began sorting. I created a new directory in the secret email Mason had built, PL Safeguard. Inside, I split folders into legal, financial, notes, and media. Legal. I uploaded the scans, the appendices, and the metadata, naming files by date. Financial. I moved every photograph, statement, receipt, and bill, renamed to match the journal, notes. I scanned each notebook page, marked them page 01, page 02, so printing would never lose order. Media. I stored recordings from the phone, compressed and tagged. For example, 2023-08-14 dinner comment wave. Once uploaded, I copied everything to an external drive, locked it in a metal box on top of the workshop shelves where no one touched but me. Then I backed up to the workshop NAS, hidden and password protected. 3 layers of defense. If one failed, 2 remained. On the screen, the folders were aligned and clean, files stacked like a finished blueprint. It felt like seeing a model house completed and knowing the foundation would hold against storms. In the days that followed, I kept life unchanged with Melissa. She still made jokes in public at my expense, still inserted herself into my schedule. I did not react. In my head, I saw each clause Alicia had written, beams of steel hidden behind walls. Melissa did not know it, but every word she spoke, every decision she imposed, only added strength to the frame. Alicia called a week later to confirm, everything is secured. You can sleep soundly as long as you manage your evidence carefully. Do not send files through any channel she might reach. Keep legal communication separate. And remember, no one must know the plan except me and Mason. I answered, I understand. And I truly did. This was no longer a matter of gathering scraps. This was a construction project with blueprints, with an engineer, and with materials ready. My only task was to guard it until the day it had to stand in court. That evening, I locked the workshop, turned off the lights, and stood outside in the rain tapping on the tin roof. In the darkness, I felt as though I had laid the first stones of a fortress. And unlike the houses I built for clients, this fortress had only one keeper who knew it existed. That keeper was me. 2 weeks before Christmas, on a damp Portland evening, I was in my study when Melissa left her phone on the kitchen counter and went into the shower. The screen lit up with a message. I had not been looking, but the words leapt straight into my mind. File the papers at the party. Want to see him collapse in front of the whole family. Beneath it was a mocking emoji and a sender's name reduced to 1 letter. I did not need to guess. I stood still for a few seconds, listening to the water run. No muscle in me trembled from shock. Instead, a cold certainty spread from my chest. The date was set. She had just given me the last signal I needed. When Melissa slept, I went to the workshop, switched on the lamp, opened the laptop, and logged into the secure email post safeguard. Within an hour, I drafted and signed my divorce petition, attaching the agreement Alicia Chen had finalized. I sent it to Alicia close to midnight. Her reply arrived only 10 minutes later. Petition received. Tomorrow morning I will file. The agreement will be sealed. You have just moved first. The next morning, while Melissa left to meet her supposed client, I went to Alicia's office. We signed the full set of papers, and she sealed the agreement in an envelope marked confidential, filed. When the court stamp came down, I knew that whatever Melissa tried at the party, my strike was already placed. Leaving the courthouse, I turned to logistics. First, I stopped at a real estate attorney's office and signed an order for a locksmith scheduled on the Monday after the holiday. The goal was simple. Once Christmas passed, the front door would open only with a new set of keys. Next, I opened a private mailbox at the bank, so all legal and financial correspondence would go there, completely separate from our shared address. The clerk asked when I wanted the mail redirected. I answered, today. I then reviewed every shared account, credit cards, savings, and checking. Any account vulnerable to being emptied was either frozen or converted to require 2 signatures. Codes secured online transactions. Only I possessed them. I did not touch a cent that was not mine, but I made sure no one could take anything without stepping through a wall of law. For daily life, I did not pack Melissa's things. Not yet. Instead, I rented a temporary apartment in the Pearl District. A 1-year lease, 6 months prepaid from a private account. The keys were sealed in an envelope, hidden in the workshop drawer. A small loft, brick walls, windows facing the Willamette, quiet enough for me to work and sleep without hearing any voice but my own. I began to move small items that Melissa would never notice. A few sets of clothes, some tools, and a hard drive. Each trip, I carried them up the stairwell from the garage, the keys clinking softly in my pocket, rehearsing for the day I would move entirely. But material preparation was only half. The other half was training my mind. I spent hours in the workshop imagining the Christmas dinner scene, not to alter it, but to etch my response. No argument, no raised voice, no crack to reveal a surprise. I pictured Melissa handing me the envelope, me opening it, signing it, and sliding it back. Every movement deliberate, calm, like signing for a package already ordered. I rehearsed the look we would give her. Not contempt, not defiance, only the gentle emptiness of someone too well prepared for anything unexpected to take root. At night, I shut off my phone, leaving only the private line for Mason and Alicia. I kept 3 duplicate copies of key documents on USB drives, sealed in metal boxes, one in the workshop, one in the apartment. Melissa noticed nothing. She still arranged my appointments, still dropped her jokes before friends, still came home late with the scent of a stranger's perfume. I did not block, did not refute. I simply logged it in the notebook and kept raising the walls of my fortress in silence. One evening as I worked, Mason came by carrying 2 coffees. He set one down and sat across from me. "You good?" I nodded. "Better than ever. I just need to keep to the plan." Mason smiled. "You are playing chess against someone who thinks the game is poker. Keep it that way." The days ticked by like a wound clock. I worked, I went home, I spoke to Melissa when required, but inside I had already stepped back into a safe distance. That distance was the soundproof wall between me and whatever blow she thought she was preparing. When the calendar showed 10 days until Christmas, I read the line in my journal. Everything ready, only waiting for the moment, and I knew the hardest part was no longer the preparation. It was keeping my hands still until the bell rang to begin. That Christmas day unfolded exactly as I had planned, but not in the way Melissa believed. She walked into the evening with the confidence of someone convinced she held absolute control. I sat quietly, watching the Christmas lights cast shadows across the table, listening to the faint clatter of cutlery, and waiting for the moment she would walk herself into the inevitable. When Melissa rose, I knew the time had come. Her voice was clear, each word pronounced like a performance for the entire room. "I have something to announce." She placed a cream envelope on the table in front of me. No one breathed. The small conversations vanished, leaving only eyes fixed on us. I opened the envelope and glanced at the first page. Divorce papers. I showed no surprise, asked no question. I simply picked up the pen, signed on the spot, the line firm and final, then slid the paper back into place. She lifted her brows, waiting for a reaction. A plea, a demand, a spark of anger. But what she found was only silence and a calm gaze. Then I reached beneath my chair for the gift I had prepared. A square brown leather case with a silver clasp. I set it neatly in front of Melissa. No explanation. She opened it, and I saw her eyes shift from curiosity to shock. Inside lay the notarized agreement, complete with appendices. At the top of the page, alongside my signature, was her own, signed 2 weeks earlier when she thought it was only a draft for reference. But the final strike was not in the papers. At that very moment, Melissa's phone vibrated. I knew what it was before she even unlocked the screen. An email from Alicia's office, my attorney, bearing the simple subject. Agreement filed and recorded. Confirmed. A timestamp beyond dispute. I sat upright, placed my hand on the table, and spoke a single sentence. Not loud, but steady enough for every ear to hear. The temporary residence order took effect this morning. The locks will be changed after the holiday. My tone was as level as a train schedule, yet I knew each word dropped heavier than any scolding could. Melissa did not respond at once. Her hand clutched the box as if to close it, but she lacked the composure. Her shoulders drew inward. I saw her eyes search for an ally at the table, but the guests only lowered their gazes. No one spoke. The air in the room shifted, laughter gone, silverware frozen midair. Only the distant notes of Christmas music drifted from the speakers, hollow and misplaced. I let the silence extend, then lifted my glass of water and drank. In my mind, I checked the pieces already secured. Joint accounts locked. Mail redirected. The apartment is ready. Every link is aligned. I was the first to stand. No one asked why. No one stopped me. I pushed in my chair, slipped on my coat, nodded politely to the elders, and walked outside. The wind cut against my face, sharp and dry, and I did not lift my scarf. I wanted to feel it, pure and bracing, more real than the false greetings left behind in that room. At the car, I pressed the remote, the chirp echoing down the dark street. I slid into the driver's seat, drew a deep breath, turned the key, and let the engine warm before steering away. In the rearview mirror, the glow of the house shrank to a pinpoint, then vanished. I did not return home. The apartment was only 10 minutes away, on the third floor of a quiet red brick building. A small pine tree in the corner scented the air, its needles mixing with the heat of the electric fire. I hung my coat, switched on the lamp, and poured a glass of wine. The phone vibrated, a message from the bank confirming the freeze of all risky accounts. Another milestone complete. I set the phone aside, leaned into the sofa, and looked through the window. Snow fell steadily, large flakes drifting slowly in the glow of street lamps. In the quiet, I let my mind replay the evening as though it were a scene in a film. No shouting, no loss of control, only a series of precise motions, ending with a dinner gone silent and a door closing behind me. Exactly as I intended, exactly as I needed to stay standing. I knew Melissa would react once she grasped the full weight of the documents filed and the clauses enforced. Perhaps long messages, perhaps endless calls. But I also knew none of it would matter. The filings were done. The residence is secured. Every retreat sealed. I drained the glass, the warmth sliding down my throat. This Christmas brought no applause, no chorus of Merry Christmas for me, but I did not need them. The greatest gift was freedom, and I had wrapped it myself weeks earlier without anyone noticing. I pulled the blanket across my legs, rested my head on the cushion. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the streets, erasing traces. Inside my mind, one chapter closed, and the space ahead waited to be written. But the next page would hold no place for anyone who thought they could dictate my life with an envelope at a dinner table. I knew Melissa would not stay quiet for long. Less than 10 minutes after I left the table, my phone began to vibrate without pause. At first, it was short messages, just fragments. What do you mean? What have you just done? Then came the calls, one after another, as if the ringing itself could pull me back. I set the phone face down and let it hum until the battery dipped a few percent. An hour later, while I was making tea, the doorbell rang at the apartment. It was not Melissa, it was Jenna, a mutual friend pulled in as a so-called mediator. She stood in the hallway, scarf damp with snow, her expression caught between discomfort and reluctance. She opened with the words Melissa had planted. She says you set a trap. She says you planned everything to strip her of everything. I did not argue. Instead, I opened the laptop, a few clicks, and pulled up a folder titled Case. December 25. Inside, files are arranged in order. 01 statement, 02 hotel email, 03 journal excerpt, 04 attorney attachment. I pointed to each. Statement, funds moved from our joint account to her private one directly after booking the hotel with him. Email, confirmation of that booking, date, and time aligned. Journal, notes cross-referenced with her handwriting. And finally, the attorney's attachment with metadata confirming time and origin. Jenna stayed silent. She did not declare Melissa right or wrong. She simply nodded and said she would speak to her. I understood what that meant. Neutral. But in moments like this, neutrality no longer equaled loyalty. Messages from other friends began to thin. At first, they echoed Melissa. Did you do this? Did you set her up? But when I responded with screenshots and PDF files, the energy drained. Many left messages unseen without reply. The rest shifted to vague half-sentences. Maybe the two of you should talk directly. Hope you find a way through. My parents, who usually avoided my private affairs, reacted with a different kind of silence. Not the silence of avoiding conflict, but of people who had seen enough data to reach their conclusion. My mother wrote one line, "You did right to prepare." My father sent only a single punctuation mark. No explanation. But I knew it was an agreement. Melissa, of course, did not sit still. A friend told me she called her lawyer that same night, her voice sharp with anger. But only hours later, that lawyer called me. His tone is careful now, hesitant, asking to clarify details of the agreement dated December 12th. I let him finish, then replied with one sentence. The file is already recorded at court, time-stamped with a witness. If needed, my attorney will resend the entire record. What followed was only silence and a sigh. The next morning, the first consequences showed. Every account I had marked risky, the ones Melissa might attempt to drain, had been temporarily frozen by the bank. Several transactions declined. I pictured her swiping a card and reading "declined" on the screen. Not out of glee, but as the marker of her financial hold officially breaking. That afternoon, Melissa sent an email nearly 2 pages long, half threat, half plea. She wrote of damaged honor, of betrayal, of my quiet gathering of evidence. But between the sentences, I saw only the imbalance of someone clinging to power already gone. I did not answer. Rumors began to ripple among friends and acquaintances. This time, the story no longer carried Melissa's color. As word of the evidence spread, many chose complete silence or sent brief lines. If you need anything, say so. Some who I thought would stand with her shifted instead to politeness laced with distance. I realized again that facts weigh heavily than stories. I did not need to speak much. I only had to place the right file in the right spot and let people see for themselves. 2 days later, Melissa tried one last angle. A message asking to meet to talk like adults. I agreed, but only in a public cafe, and I carried a copy of the entire record. The meeting lasted under 15 minutes. She raised her voice, but in the open space, it sounded less like authority and more like loss of control. I opened each file, pointed to dates, numbers, and signatures. No argument, no escalation. When she found nothing left to counter, she sat still, eyes fixed on the street outside, lips pressed tight. I closed the folder, slid it back into my bag, and rose. The rest will be handled by lawyers. Then I walked out. The glass door closed behind me, leaving only the sound of spoons stirring coffee beneath a soft jazz track. I left that meeting the same way I had left the Christmas dinner, before anyone could spin a new script, before words could trap me in a performance I did not need. That night, back at the apartment, I opened the window to let the cold air in. The city glimmered with the last of the holiday lights. I knew the chain of consequences from Christmas night was far from over. There would be more calls, more emails, more talk. But the critical shift had already happened. Melissa no longer held the advantage. And more importantly, she no longer dictated the story of my life. I left the temporary apartment as soon as I found a place that felt right. A small loft in East Portland, high ceilings, wide windows that opened toward rows of red maples now stripped of most of their leaves. The wooden floor had darkened with age, but the morning light that poured across it carried a warmth, soft as honey. I kept everything minimal. A long desk built from reclaimed pine, a chair worn but steady, a bookshelf I built with my own hands. Every joint, every grain polished carefully, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself that this new space existed because I chose it, because I made it. In those first days, I gave myself time to reorder my work. I opened a small workshop each weekend, entirely free, for anyone who wanted to learn about design and woodcraft. At first, only a handful came, mostly architecture students and curious neighbors. But word spread and more people appeared. Some brought sketches of their projects, asking how to solve a technical detail. Others simply wanted to feel the sharp scent of fresh wood on the saw blade for the first time. I took on a few apprentices, people willing to learn, not for quick money, but for the patience and precision in each cut. I also began reconnecting with friends I had lost in the years spent orbiting Melissa. Mason, my old classmate from design school, invited me to join the East Side Design Circle, a community of artists and makers in Portland. Naomi, a freelance photographer, came by to capture a series of images of the workshop, part archive, part gift to share with the wider community. Once I stepped out of the old noise, I found the real connections were still there, waiting for me to return. I built small habits, steady and quiet. Each morning before any work, I brewed out a cup of black coffee and stood by the window as the sunlight fell across the floor. On days without rain, I ran along the East Bank Esplanade, the river path opening into the full view of the city. The rhythm of my shoes on the boards, the steady breath, the cool river wind, all of it reminded me I was exactly where I needed to be. At night, I played jazz or soft folk, letting the sound drift with the rasp of the plane across wood. Some nights I worked late, not from pressure or deadlines, but from the calm of being alone with material and idea. I realized it had been years since I last slept through the night without jolting awake to a message or a meaningless sound. No more tense afternoons were bracing for an invisible eruption. Those moments when I never knew when Melissa might lash out or change her mind without warning. Now, if there was a knock on the door, it meant a neighbor with a fresh loaf of bread or Mason stopping by with drawings under his arm. Every sound in this house lay within my control, and that was more valuable than anything I had ever owned. Slowly, I saw that I was no longer just escaping a ruined chapter, but building a new foundation. From wood and sketches, from conversations carried without pretense, I was shaping a life where I set the rhythm. And in that simplicity, I found the most extravagant thing of all, peace. 1 year after that Christmas night, as Portland shifted again into winter, I received a short message from Melissa. Only one line, we should talk. It was not something I had been waiting for, but it did not surprise me. People often try to return to the places they once believed belonged to them, even if they were the ones who ruined them. We met at a small cafe near the Hawthorne Bridge. Melissa arrived 10 minutes late, wearing the beige wool coat I had once given her. It looked older now, wrinkled and tired. When she finally sat down, she held my eyes for a long time before speaking, her voice slow and quiet. I misjudged you. I thought I could control everything, but I was wrong. I listened without interruption. She spoke about the difficulties that came after, contracts lost, friends who no longer returned her calls, lawyers who stepped away from her case because there was no ground left to stand on. At moments, her eyes shimmered, not quite tears, but the fatigue of someone forced to admit defeat. When she grew silent, I answered. My voice was steady, needing no rise or fall. Melissa, I forgive you, not to forget, but so that both of us can move forward without carrying the weight. But going back is not an option. You can repair a house, replace the doors, and repaint the walls. But once the foundation of respect has collapsed, there is no ground left for us. She stayed still for a moment, then gave a small nod, as if she understood that this answer had been written long before she arranged the meeting. We parted at the cafe door. No embrace, no handshake. Only two people who had once shared a home now walking in opposite directions. That afternoon, I returned to the workshop. The last light of day cut through the window, wood dust hanging in the air like flecks of gold. On the table lay a new drawing I was finishing, a wall-mounted bookshelf for a young family in the neighborhood. I placed my hand on the page, feeling each pencil line, each idea still unfolding, like the steady growth of my own life. I understood then that true victory was never about forcing someone else into regret. It was in holding the line of your boundaries. Respect, once broken, cannot be borrowed back. And peace is the reward reserved for those who refuse to trade it away. If you are listening to this story, remember, your boundaries are your foundation. Do not allow anyone to cross them without consequence. Protect the truth. Keep calm after the storm, and never hesitate to walk away once the foundation has cracked. And if you want to hear more stories about boundaries, about truth, and about finding stillness within yourself, subscribe. Because sometimes a story told at the right moment can become the foundation for your own life.